Right after Pearl Harbor, the Japs grabbed up most of the islands in the Pacific. At Guadalcanal, we learned how to fight the Jap. And he learned that we were coming back. At New Georgia, it took us a bit longer, but we learned a lot more. At New Britain, we beat the Jap at jungle fighting. Macon Atoll brought us into the Gilberts. Tarawa was fast and tough and expensive. Kwajalein was next. It gave us control of the Marshalls. We were halfway back. Eniwetok made veterans of us all. Now we were ready to smash at Japan's front door, the Marianas Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. D-Day, the battle for the Marianas. The LSTs unload their Amtraks. We attack again, a joint assault force of Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. Saipan. Nothing can stop the Amtraks except a direct hit. Keep driving in. One of our planes is hit. Jap fire pins us down. We start across the beach. The Jap throws everything he has at us. Many of us are hit. Even the wounded carry on. We secure our first foothold in the Marianas. Another D-Day. To the south, another joint assault force smashes at Guam. Coast Guard gets us through heavy enemy fire. Guam is American ground. The first piece of territory the Jap took from us. We're taking it back. The flag is planted again on Guam. It has a special meaning for every one of us. On Saipan, we strike for our first objectives. Tank and infantry teams push inland. we push on to the Jap air base. There it is, Aslito Field. Precision bombing and shelling before D-Day wrecked the hangars and buildings, but saved the runways. Now we can use ground-based fighters and bombers. The Nips got out in such a hurry, we captured many of their planes undamaged. This Zero was caught in its revetment. With the Aslito Field secure, we head north through the cane fields. We hack through the hills and underbrush day after day, taking with us only the most important things: weapons. One night, they massed their tanks and counterattacked. This is what happened to all their tanks. The Japs knocked out one of ours. Those are the Japs. The Navy's big guns keep hammering away. When this Jap ammunition dump blew up, it shook the whole island. The flamethrowers move up. Heavy enemy fire is coming from those caves. Burn them out of their pillboxes. The fight is on for Garapan, capital of the Marianas. Army artillery goes into action. At the same time, we shell Tinian Island across the channel from Saipan. When we take Tinian, we get the biggest airfield in the Marianas. The battle for Garapan and Mount Tapacho goes on 24 hours a day. Tank runs interference while we evacuate our wounded under heavy Jap fire. Snipers have to be cleaned out. We use rockets. We smoke them out with incendiaries. We take a Jap prisoner. The battle from inside a tank. Lieutenant General Holland Smith, U.S. Marine Corps, commanding the assault forces. Another Jap oil dump goes up. Thunderbolts take off from our new field. We blast the Jap command post overlooking Tanapag Harbor. Bomb Jap strong points in the hills. The Japs bring down another one of our planes. Enter Garapan. Now it's house-to-house fighting. They're waiting behind hedges, underneath buildings, behind walls, everywhere. 37s are used to knock them out of their emplacements. Jap makes a run for it. Garapan is ours. Japs fall back slowly. In the hills. Tracers find their gun positions. We corner them on the north end of the island. Loudspeakers are broken out and a friendly native broadcasts an appeal for them to surrender. We hold our fire. We wait. Many civilians do surrender. They set up community kitchens and make rice balls. For those who refuse to surrender, final cleanup is on. Our front line advances. Sniper is burned out. We reduce a bunker. Some try to escape by swimming. Hand grenades are effective. They take up positions in the cliffs. We have to pick them off one by one. Some choose suicide by jumping. Others surrender. And some fight until the end. Buried our dead. 4,470. O'Connor, Vandermeer, Schultz, Levine, Kalafatich, Smith, Olson.
In the Southwest Pacific, 500 miles from the Philippines, are the Palaos, westernmost of the Japanese mandated islands. On a tiny one called Peleliu, the Japs have a good airstrip. We must seize it to protect our invasion of the Philippines. It will also help us cut off a great chain of enemy strongholds loaded with troops. We begin by softening it up, bombing, strafing. Navy planes from fast carrier forces strike first. 3,000 sorties are flown, dropping over 2.5 million pounds of bombs. Heavy bombers of the Far Eastern Air Force fly 400 sorties to add another 2 million pounds. When the two air arms have completed their strikes, Jap air strength in the Palaus is crossed out. The stage is now set. From their bases, Guadalcanal, Pearl Harbor, the Marshalls, come the assault forces. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, transports, over 600 ships of all types. It requires 3 Navy men afloat to put 1 soldier or Marine ashore. The 1st Marine Division is in those transports over there. They'll take Peleliu. And in these is the 81st Army Division. They'll take Angar 6 miles south, which also must be held before Peleliu is secure. D-1. Those who can have a bath. All have a good meal. Close all watertight doors and hatches. And the assault force is buttoned up, ready for action. There's the signal. 30 seconds to go. Turrets are loaded with 2,000-pound projectiles, 200 pounds of powder. And 300 heavy guns train on the target. Ready? Commence firing. During 3 days and nights, the Navy will pour 6,000 tons of hot steel on the island. Take those small guns, the 40 millimeters. They alone will fire 100,000 shells. The big guns, 70,000. 12 million pounds of punishment. The enemy is well dug in over there, holed up in strong pillboxes and deep caves. This will kill a lot of them, soften up their defenses. The Marines will have the bulk of the Jap strength left to face when they get ashore. H hour for the Marines. 3 regiments will land abreast on a 2,000-yard beach. The 1st and 5th will pivot left and head toward Bloody Nose Ridge. The 7th will pivot right to secure that flank. The airstrip is straight ahead. Jap mortar and artillery fire is heavy. The first wave is pinned down. 20 landing vehicles are knocked out, but we're on the beach. Carrier planes strafing Jap positions. Casualties the first day, 92 killed, 1,100 wounded, 58 missing. Veterans, these Marines. Guadalcanal, New Britain. This is their 3rd show. Well-trained, well-equipped, expert with rifles, grenades, flamethrowers, mortars, artillery. 15 million rifle and machine gun bullets, 90,000 mortar shells, 150,000 field artillery shells, and 125,000 hand grenades will be presented by the Marine Corps to Imperial Japan, with the compliments of hometown USA. Here's the airstrip, focus of the battle. That's Bloody Nose Ridge in the background, 1,000 yards away. Up there, the Jap is heavily entrenched in a honeycomb of caves and fortified positions. That's where he'll make his final stand. D+2. 2 days, 2,000 Purple Hearts. Some of these Marines were on Peleliu for only a few hours. Some will remain forever. Meanwhile, over on Angar Island, 6 miles away, soldiers of the 81st Army Division are landing. This is their first engagement. Like the Marines, their combat strength is around 15,000 men. Reinforcements and supply echelons double that figure. It required 20 transports to bring the 81st to this beach. Again, the pattern of war in the Pacific. Landing craft, tanks, assault waves driving in to establish a beachhead. Then the push inland. Here too are caves, pillboxes, and blockhouses. From the same type of enemy. Smart, experienced veterans from China and Manchuria campaigns. 16 days will be required for the 81st to take Angar. Back at Peleliu, the Japs attempted to bring up reinforcements during the night. They were repulsed, but a few concealed themselves on these sunken boats. Snipers. Marine pilots flying one of the shortest bomber missions on record, from the airstrip to Bloody Nose, 1,000 yards. Inland, the Marines are struggling yard by yard for Bloody Nose Ridge. Made to order for the Jap system of defense. Ridges, sharp peaks, vertical cliffs, deeply gutted depressions, all held in a crossfire from caves and pillboxes. Casualties are mounting now, even among the combat cameramen. 9 fell taking these pictures. Elements of the 81st Army Division, tanks, infantry, come over from Angar to help out. There's a Jap. Finally, it's over. More than 300 prisoners. From a tree-covered stronghold, Bloody Nose Ridge has been reduced to a scarred heap of rubble strewn with Jap dead. Over 10,000 of them. And we have what we came after, the airstrip. But we have something more. By typical operations like this and Iwo Jima, we have cut off 250,000 Jap troops in the islands of the Pacific. And this fighting must go on without pause until the Pacific War is won.
From Pearl Harbor on the night of October 23rd, Admiral Nimitz radioed a message to the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. The Second Battle of the Philippines had begun. For the men of the Third Fleet, this was the climax to a battle they had been waging for months. The men who were over Saipan in June, Guam in July, Palau in September, were moving west. They were hitting hard all over the map, all around the clock. Army and Navy flyers had pounded Japanese defenses from one end to the other, but they all pointed toward one day, October 19, and one target, the Philippines. The invasion force was protected by our mighty 3rd and 7th Fleets. The 100,000 GIs didn't know where they were heading. but they knew it would be the last place the Japs wanted them to go. There were hundreds of islands to pick from, and the enemy couldn't watch them all. It wasn't to be Luzon, where we fought our heroic delaying action at Bataan and Corregidor. It wasn't to be Mindanao, where Philippine guerrillas have never ceased fighting. Instead, our Joint Chiefs of Staff had chosen an inconspicuous island with a name most Americans had never heard. But overnight, it would be spoken in the same breath with the Coral Sea, Midway, and Guadalcanal, Leyte. America was ready to fulfill her promise. Return to the Philippines. The men of the 6th Army hit Philippine beaches and fought inland. Liberation of 16 million Filipinos was on the march, led by General MacArthur and President Osmeña. Back home, Americans read the optimistic headlines and thought the worst was over. But the Navy knew the main event was still to be fought. This was the day our Navy had been waiting for. But it was also the day for which the Japanese High Command had been waiting. For they knew they were sending this battle fleet against us with the odds as high in their favor as they would ever be. Their supply lines were shorter, their fleet had been resting in home waters, and could be supported by hundreds of land-based planes. In the language of military men, our Army was committed to this action. This was the fateful moment of every invasion, when a mighty army stands with one foot on land and the other in the sea. Knowing this, the Japanese were ready to unfold their master plan.
A crushing pincer movement of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers will navigate the narrow approaches to the American beachhead, cutting MacArthur off from his supply lines and destroying naval support. And, in addition, we have planned another surprise.
Before they reached the approaches to Leyte, the Japs lost the important element of surprise. Our submarine, searching deep in enemy waters, surfaced right in the middle of the Japanese fleet, broke radio silence to flash back the report. And that's not all they did. They sank 2 Japanese cruisers. The Navy had eyes above the sea as well. We knew what was coming and where it was coming from. And our carriers lost no time dispatching a reception committee. Hour after hour, the 2 oncoming Japanese forces forming the pincers ran a gauntlet of bombs, torpedoes, and tracer fire, and then, under cover of darkness, our destroyers crept into Surigao Strait under the big guns of the Jap Southern Force and let go their torpedoes. The PTs were there too, with more fish. It was a rugged trip through both straits for the Emperor's invincible forces, but they fought on, determined to break through. As the jaws of the pincers kept closing, Admiral Kincaid had to make a vital decision. By 3 a.m., this southern prong of the Jap pincer was going to be too close to our beachhead for comfort. The Admiral decided to concentrate his main firepower down here and hit them from all sides as they came into the Gulf. Meanwhile, Admiral Sprague was holding his light carrier force here to guard our right flank. Then, if everything went right, we could knock out this southern threat in time to protect our beachhead from their big battleship task force fighting its way around Samar. Admiral Halsey would be rushing up to hurl his third fleet against a new Japanese surprise party reported bearing down from the north. Ready to blast the southern section of the Tokyo Express were 5 battleships the Japs had never expected to face again. The California, the West Virginia, the Pennsylvania, the Maryland, the Tennessee. The old battle wagons that had lain in muddy humiliation at Pearl Harbor were waiting for revenge.
Bearing 273. Bearing 273. Range 12500. Range 12500.
Coming on target, sir.
Permission to open fire, sir.
Fire when ready.
The first salvos were fired at a range of over 25,000 yards, nearly 13 miles, and scored a direct hit. That's American gunnery, laying our main batteries on a moving target in the dead of night. The chips were down for the heaviest surface action of World War II. By 5 a.m., the Southern enemy force turned and fled. That is, all but 10 warships, which reached the Gulf of Leyte, the bottom of the Gulf. While the lower prong of the enemy pincer was being smashed, the upper prong was closing in through San Bernardino Strait, led by Japan's newest, fastest battleships. This force had been pounded and strafed until it turned back, only to come on again in one last fanatical attempt to smash through to our beachhead. Nothing stood between them and their objective except a group of low-speed, unarmored baby flat tops, screened by a handful of destroyers and destroyer escorts. The powerful 16 and 14-inch guns of these Japanese dreadnoughts were leveled against the light batteries of our escort vessels. Never outfought, but outgunned, outnumbered, outmatched, our jeep carriers radioed for help to Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet in the north. Admiral Halsey had to make a difficult decision. Should he go to the rescue and ignore the surprise from the north? Should he hold his position and leave our small force off Samar to fight overwhelming odds? The Admiral did neither. Instead, he kept the main units of his powerful command on its course, but dispatched a carrier group to the Samar battle area. Facing the murderous barrage of the Jap heavyweights at point-blank range, these little ships, fighting a desperate battle for time, used everything in the book to stay afloat and never stopped firing until the sea closed over 4 of them. A grateful people will remember their names. The Gambier Bay, the USS Cole, the Johnston, the Samuel B. Roberts. Theirs is a new and valiant chapter in our naval history. On the dawn of the third day, while the battle was still raging in the south, the curtain was rising in the north on another phase of this great naval engagement. Sweeping down from Japanese home waters came this third great enemy force, supported by waves of land-based bombers, dedicated to the imperial mission of striking the finishing blow for Hirohito. The Japs were flinging on the board of war their highest stakes, their future as a naval power. Once again, our fighting men rose up to meet the enemy. Even the men of the sunken Princeton fought on from other decks. Our pilots swarmed from more carriers than the Japs had ever seen before to knock the enemy out of the sky. blast them from the sea. Below them was the Japanese fleet. This was it. Most of them, but you can't get them all. Sometimes we had to fight fire and Japs at the same time. Some of ours had trouble up there too. Everyone they crippled, more were taking on. Still they came on. Japs zigzagged crazily, but there was no place in the Philippine Sea this day where they could hide from the most devastating attack ever launched in the Pacific. every enemy ship that still had a rudder was doing its best to turn and run for home. For even while thousands of Japs were being fished out of the very waters they had considered their own private sea, our fleet was hunting down the remnants of 3 Imperial forces. And as night fell on the last day of battle, this was all that would ever be seen of 24 Japanese warships and 400 enemy planes. 35 more warships were sinking or straggling home. For every victory, men must die. It was battle-smashed planes like these that told the story of that victory eloquently. For here in this plane, damaged beyond repair, an American airman died at his battle station. His shipmates felt it fitting that he be buried this way. For now, let him be nameless. Let him be all the sons of America who have died for our cause. Let his death make that cause all the more precious to us, the living. With the enemy wounded, but desperately rebuilding his fleet for a savage defense of his island fortress. Our course is set for 1945, pointing past Leyte and Mindoro, beyond the Philippines, through Japan itself. A dangerous foe that again and again must be brought to action.
We're back to where it all began. This was the curve in the long and weary road. The memory of the Philippines was still fresh, an open, still festering wound that refused to heal. Remembering, the web spinners cast out their strands of flesh and steel toward the next objective, to drop them over the curved spine of the Philippine archipelago. Leyte. Kenny's 5th Air Force softened up the enemy. And then the infantry hit the beaches. They won. More than they lost. Luzon, the crux of an earlier command decision. Was it really going to save more lives and shorten the war? It was time now to find out. Pinpoints of death, opening the door to Manila Bay. American lives were saved, and those who lived found their own ways of being grateful. Manila.
We hit the beach on Lingayen Gulf, 100 miles north of Manila. We thought we'd be moving into the teeth of enemy resistance. We were wrong. That was to come later. We pushed on down the valley toward Manila, cleaning out little pockets of resistance where we found them. Out ahead of us, Air Force and Navy planes were softening up the way. We moved cautiously forward, wondering what had happened to the enemy. And for a while there, it looked like we were tourists having ourselves a real ball. Along the way, one of the GIs picked up an innocent-looking piece of paper, which turned out to be an enemy field order. It contained information of enemy intentions and plans, useful intelligence. Filipino guerrillas brought in reports that American and Allied prisoners were in the city. So we stepped up the pace in the outskirts of Manila and finally established contact with the enemy. But we soon lost it, and we realized the enemy was withdrawing to the heart of the city. At Grace Park, where the monument stands, snipers took pot shots at us and slowed down our advance somewhat. And the only satisfaction I recall here was that my outfit was the first to enter Manila proper. A fierce battle suddenly developed in, of all places, Rizal Stadium, Manila's baseball park. The enemy had dug himself in under the stands, and we slugged it out with him with no cover. Rizal Stadium, a baseball park. No game today. Then we raced into the University of Santo Tomas and liberated hundreds of American and Allied internees. It had been 3 years since this pathetic group of prisoners had seen a free American. Everyone in Santo Tomas was fortunate that there had been U.S. Army and Navy nurses who had been captured on Corregidor to care for you during those dark years. After we arrived, wires were sent home by the internees, and many replies came back in a few hours, affecting some noticeably. But for everyone, the liberation was a big celebration party. Kids who'd had no toys for 3 years now had giant-sized ones. And all of us were discussing how wonderful it was that the nightmare was over at last. Wasn't all over. We saw internees who'd survived the 3 years as prisoners killed by the incoming fire. I'll never forget evacuating the seriously ill and injured through the falling shells. The deeper we got into Manila, the more fanatical enemy resistance became. They couldn't escape and they wouldn't surrender, so they fought till they died. Most of them anyway. Our casualties were heavy. And the more we moved into the heart of the city, the more the enemy took advantage of the huge government buildings for defensive positions. Some of the buildings had to be ripped apart stone by stone before we could continue our advance. The enemy defensive plan soon became apparent. He was fighting delaying actions to allow his troops to cross the Pasig River, which cuts Manila east and west right through the middle. We pressed forward as fast as we could through fantastic tangles of broken buildings. each enemy unit crossed the Passaic River, a bridge was destroyed, leaving one less for us when we reached the river. Our troops found out the hard way just about all there is to know about street-to-street, building-to-building combat. And the more we learned, the faster we moved, denying the enemy the advantage of a leisurely withdrawal. And his men who couldn't pull back dug in and fought till they died. Many Filipinos braved frontline fire, handing out cigars or candy to show their gratitude to us. The enemy had orders from the High Command. Hold Manila. In the fighting that followed, flames raged everywhere. Detonating barrels and drums of gasoline and motor oil added to the inferno. And through it all, the GIs kept up the initiative, carrying the attack forward toward the Passaic River. Firefighting equipment which had survived the street fighting was used, but it was hardly worth the effort. The fire gained momentum, burning city blocks at a time, consuming everything in its path that would burn, and it seemed to reach its peak of destruction at night. The Battle of Manila had reached a decisive phase. We were north of the Passaic River, and the enemy was south, and moving into the famed old walled city called Intramuros. We kept the enemy pinned down with our fire while we brought up troops to prepare for a boat crossing of the Passaic. An isolated pocket of resistance developed in Manila's city prison called Bilibid. Filipinos brought in word that American prisoners, many captured on Corregidor, were being held in Bilibid. We stepped up the attack and raced toward the city prison. Inside Bilibid, we found them. Old beyond their years, but possessing an undaunted spirit. They lined up for chow with a 3-year appetite. The battle in Manila was going into the final phases. All of the enemy forces alive had withdrawn into the walled city south of the Passaic River. Now they literally had their backs to the wall. They couldn't escape and wouldn't surrender. So we got set for the final round. The plan, roughly, was to concentrate our artillery, mortar, and small arms fire on the enemy while we crossed the Passaic. Wire communications were strung to assure the closest coordination of overhead fire. Finally, when everything was all set, the order was given to commence firing. lined up assault boats and amphibious tracked vehicles and then made the first river crossing attempt. We had no way of knowing how successful our concentration of fire had been on the enemy in the walled city. But we found that they apparently were effective, since the only incoming fire on us was small arms. Soon we were pouring across the river, getting established on the south side and moving toward the closest wall of the walled city. All of us knew by now that the toughest barrier of Manila was directly ahead, the 14-foot thick wall of Intramuros. While we approached our objective, our artillery and tracked vehicles gave us direct fire support. Between the river and the walled city was an open park area. And as we moved over it, we realized that this was the first open spot we had crossed since the Battle of Manila had begun. The closer we got to the walled city, the more we saw of the effectiveness of our artillery and mortar fire in softening up the enemy positions. Filipinos willingly pointed out prepared defensive positions of the enemy. Finally, we reached the outside wall. It took a great deal of probing to find the proper place to make the assault. For breaching this fortress was no easy matter, regardless of how much artillery we had poured into it. But we finally cracked it. Once inside Intramuros, the city within the walls, the battle was suddenly over. Only the rubble and chaos of combat remained. And among the debris, we found human wreckage. Many of the Filipinos who had lived in Intramuros were dead. Those who somehow miraculously survived started a great mass exodus across the river to go anywhere. Anywhere away from the horrors of the walled city.
Officers and enlisted men alike fervently awaited the next move. They wanted Corregidor, and fast. The strategy decided on was the one of surprise. The web spinners gambled on an enemy attitude, that no one in his right mind would even consider dropping a regiment of paratroopers on such a small target. They would more likely anticipate an approach from the sea. The Allied High Command decided to go for broke. Naval bombardment, aerial attack, amphibious landings, and a parachute drop. The 503rd Regimental Combat Team was the jump regiment picked to do the job. Brigadier General George M. Jones was a colonel when he commanded the 503rd in that memorable jump.
I suppose historic is about as good a word as any to describe what happened that day. Corregidor is a little island that lies in the mouth of Manila Bay, and as such has historically controlled the entrance to Manila. I think the troops of the 503rd were enthusiastic about the jump. Of course, any veteran paratrooper knows that when he jumps into an operation, that he's jumping into the unknown. He expects to be surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned. And the realization of this, of course, certainly makes for individual tension. But I think at the time of the drop, the troops were really ready to go. We had 2 drop zones and 2 series of planes that came in single file over each drop zone. The wind was blowing. We actually didn't know prior to the jump what the weather was going to be, but we knew that the wind was a factor. And this really was the weather part of the operation that had made us alter our plan somewhat. We started off jumping 8 men at about, I believe, 550 feet jump altitude, which is a fairly low altitude for a parachute jump. As each plane in the serial would come over a prearranged point, we would give the word to count a certain number of seconds, and then the first man of that stick would go out. We started off jumping 8 people in a stick, a stick meaning the number that are going to jump at that pass over the drop zone. But because of the wind, which turned out to be about 22 knots, we had to lower our altitude successively from 550 to 500 and then finally 400 feet. Each plane had, as I recall, about 21 or 22 paratroopers. This whole jump was controlled by Colonel John Lackey, the troop carrier commander, and myself, who were flying above the formation and giving specific instructions to the jump masters in each plane. Of course, these drop zones were pretty small for normal parachute dropping. We normally thought in terms of a drop zone of about 1,000 yards long at least and several hundred yards wide. These drop zones were small, the largest one being about 200 yards long and about 100 yards wide. They were surrounded by rubble and rather high buildings. All of these things added to the hazard of the drop. Of course, we had a few casualties on the jump, not as many as I had anticipated, however. Prior to the jump, I estimated that we might have as many as 50% casualties. As a matter of fact, my estimates ran between 10 and 50% because of the nature of the drop zone, the wind, and the other factors. We got by with 12 or 13% casualties on the jump. Now, as far as the surprises, of course, this operation was short, as fast, and full of surprises. From almost the word go, we had surprises. There were kamikaze operations. The third day, they blew up Malena Tunnel, where they had a great number of explosives stored.
The jump was dramatic and successful. The enemy was hit around the clock in every way he could be hurt. From the sea, on the beaches, in the streets. The end was in sight. As suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The web, indeed, had overtaken the rock.
I believe that the most lasting memory is General MacArthur's visit to the island of Corregidor. After the operation was all over, General MacArthur visited what was always considered by many people as one of the soft spots in his heart. He had a great affection for Corregidor. He came back and in a little ceremony with a few troops from each of the units that had participated, we formally returned the island to him. And I shall always remember that now very famous quotation when General MacArthur looked at me and said, "I see the old flagpole still stands. Have your troops hoist the colors to the top and let no enemy ever haul them down."
Corregidor sleeps with her ghosts. They cannot talk. They speak only through the legacy they have left behind in this fortress in the sea.
As you know it. Wide stretches of water. But this is the Pacific as the Joint Chiefs of Staff view it. A battlefield, a vast fortress-studded plain on which key strongholds anchor a Japanese defense line guarding the heart of the homeland. The American front lines had advanced to Guam and Saipan. Ahead now stood Iwo Jima, the most heavily fortified island in the world. Buried deep underground lay 20 years of Jap preparation for murder. 20,000 of their toughest fighting men waited for us to make the first move.
And they don't have to wait long. The Navy begins to soften up the island so we can land. Carrier force take off to strafe and bomb. close to work over enemy beach installations. Enemy fire gets closer. D-Day, beginning of the toughest 26 days in Marine Corps history. We watched the central control vessel. When this flag drops, our landing craft will head for the beach. Landing craft in 10 waves advance on 3,000 yards of beach. Keeps us pinned down. We want to pull the beach over our heads like a blanket. Navy medical corpsmen get our wounded out fast. Our tanks come ashore and grind inland. We're able to advance from Yellow Beach, but it's slow going. Trouble on Green Beach. From their fortified positions on Mount Suribachi, the Japs look right down our throats. call the command ship standing offshore. Our message is received. The situation map is checked. The support air director contacts carrier plane circling the target. The flight leader receives his instructions. From the air, supporting ships deliver point-blank fire. After 72 hours of continuous pounding, our patrols move forward. The mortar barrage searches out hidden machine gun nests. Sharp lookout for snipers. Admiral Turner gives the order to cease fire. Our guns are quiet as they make the climb. We wait for a sign. Suribachi is ours. Suribachi is ours. A toehold on the southern tip of the island. But ahead, the main strength of the Jap garrison was entrenched in steel and concrete. The show was just beginning. Navy and Coast Guardsmen rushed supplies ashore for the big push north. Coming out of every hole and every rock. It was tough going. Many didn't make it. Crossfire ahead is murderous. Rocket trucks go into action. move our dead. There are heavy defenses on the ridges overlooking this plain. They draw a bead on us again. Us off there 5 times. We came back 6. We brought in our wounded, and we took a breather. Carried to the rear. Plasma's given on the way. Hospital dugouts are ready for anything. And we are ready to advance again. We call for artillery. Duel develops at night. One of our ammunition dumps goes up. In 2 weeks, we have cleaned out plenty of Japs between here and Suribachi. But there's still a lot of island to be taken, with thousands of Japs fighting from blockhouses, pillboxes, and caves. We have to go in and dig them out, one by one. We prayed. Along the beach was only a small part of the cost of 26 days of fighting. too. Names of our friends. We stacked the helmets of our dead in neat piles. Helmets of 4,000 men who died to take a tiny island somewhere in the Pacific.
You're right, Marine. You've taken a tiny island. But it's not just 8 square miles of rock. Today, it's an American fortress only 4 hours from Tokyo. Today, from your little island, giant striking forces are launched against the heart of Japan. Today, our planes and ships are blasting the enemy into ashes at the foot of Fujiyama.
With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
Here we were, closer than any fleet in history to a major land-based air power. At Midway, in the Coral Sea, even in the Marianas, distance had been against the Japanese Air Force. But now, as our fleet sailed against the enemy inner island, the range was easy for any Jap plane that could fly. There were those who said no fleet could risk it, but the stakes were high. With Okinawa in our hands, we could control the China coast, send swarms of planes to smother Japan. We were reaching for the throat of an empire. The risk must be taken. On the island of Okinawa, 5,000 miles from San Francisco, the earth shook from a fearful pounding by our ships and planes. To the south, our British allies were hurling their naval might at the bypassed fortress of Formosa. They were raking Sakashima with shell and bomb. England's greatest battleships and newest carriers were there, screening us on the south, paying off with pleasure an old debt to Nippon. On the northern flank, Admiral Mark A. Mitcher's tireless Task Force 58 stepped up its 2 weeks old aerial assault on Kyushu and the enemy home islands. It was the 4th of July in reverse, on Japanese shipping, harbors, airfields, factories.
there's a Jap carrier in trouble. Men of the Navy, 400,000 men, called it Love Day. Elsewhere in the world, it was Easter Sunday, 1945. At 8:30 that morning, the Marines and the Army went in. "100,000 Yanks were rattling the lock on Japan's front door. They were plowing sacred soil with American boots, tractors, tanks. The first 7 days were battling, mysteriously quiet. Ashore, Army and Marines pushed steadily forward, looking for an enemy which had vanished. On the 1,400 ships supporting the invasion, men waited at their battle stations and waited. We knew the blow would come, but how and when? Then it struck. They call it kamikaze, meaning the divine tempest. We call them suicide planes, manned by pilots wearing the ceremonial red sash of the Kamikaze Corps. They specialize in one-way trips. Their destination, the deck or hull of any American ship onto which plane, bombs, burning gasoline, and red-sashed pilot can crash. Japan's secret weapon was no secret to our gunners or our flyers, who for months had been tinting the far Pacific with those same red sashes. But now, to meet our latest challenge, our deepest thrust, there rose every plane that could fly, new or old, from the very heart of Japan itself. "16-year-olds, still in aviation schools, were given their wings, a sash, and a mission. It was a maniacal, all-out effort to smash our sea power, isolate our troops on Okinawa. It was desperation. It was suicide. But it would be the pattern from now on to the very finish. A struggle between men who want to die and men who fight to live. still heading for the target. Missed. Night it went on. Hundreds of land-based planes streaked low over the sea at our carrier. Dove out of the dawn, raced through dull overcast to throw themselves in screaming, smoking fury at Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner's ships off Okinawa. Again, the old battleships were there, and new ships of the line. And a rugged little man named Ernie Pyle. There was no retreat. This was the fleet that came to stay, that had to stay. To stay because the men that the Navy landed needed tons of steel from Navy guns. Even as we beat off fresh waves of Jap planes overhead, the big guns of the fleet smashed enemy strongholds miles away. Had to stay because our men advancing through the rice paddies and over the steep ridges had to have close air support from the baby flat tops. In the air control room aboard the command ship, strike upon strike was ordered. Then the Navy and Marine flyers laid down precise, deadly rocket fire to help make the next 50 yards of advance less costly. This was the fleet that had to stay because always the stream of supplies to those troops must be steady and huge. A bridge of ships was thrown across the Pacific to bring our men more food, more medicine, more ammunition. And waiting at the end of the longest supply route in any war were the kamikazes. It was weird. It was savage. This was a fleet fighting like infantry, punching away at the enemy. Only there are no foxholes in the ocean.
March 18th to the 21st, 556 Japanese planes destroyed.
Men fought without sleep. Some fought with guns. Some with axes, torches. Some with fire-smothering foam. was fix and fight at the same time. Many fell at their battle stations, and some were buried. Give Up the Ship became more than a schoolbook legend. It became a fact of life. April 13th brought more planes and shocking news. Between attacks, weary men, afloat and ashore, paid honor to the beloved figure in the blue Navy cloak, said farewell to the father of the modern American Navy. Then they turned and met the next assault. During 3 fabulous months, thousands of aircraft were hurled against our ships. But only 10% ever slipped through our air patrol. Yet the siege by air went on. The Japanese beast still spat zero.
April 6th, 277 enemy planes shot down. April 12th, 100 planes. May 3rd, 97.
In the early gray hours of the morning watch on May 9th, the great news came. VE Day in Europe. It came first to the lookouts, to the men who stand guard while the others sleep. Men were glad and grateful. Home seemed a little nearer. But for now, VE Day was simply the 1,247th day of our Pacific War. From the rolling decks of our carriers, the fighters rose once again to intercept the enemy. On the cruisers and destroyers and battleships, our heavy batteries once more leveled against the Jap-studded hills of Okinawa. The barking 20s and 40s sent streams of fiery lead into the world's last alien sky.
May 12th, 164 Jap aircraft down. June 3rd, 45. June 6th, 67. June 8th, 30.
Week after vicious week, the most devastating air-sea battle of all time wore on. The Japanese paid with their Air Force, with their newest ships, 4,232 planes. The fleet that came to stay paid a price too. But our men, our ships, our planes took everything the land could throw at the sea and handed it back double. The question, could a fleet stand up against the massed fury of land-based planes got an emphatic answer from the men who fight to live, from the fleet that came to stay.